Well, I think we've moved in a very short period of time, and probably that's sort of been bridged by the recession, from a situation where you've had a service, i.e. that finance has been seen as a service in a business, particularly by somebody like me as a chief executive, an ex-chief executive or chairman, to now a partnership. And I think that's a really important change, that today businesses have discovered that they can't work independent of finance. And in fact, if they work together with finance and they work far enough ahead with finance, actually their lives can be a lot easier and the results can be a lot more successful. Well, I'm not going to give you all my top tips because there'll be nothing for me to say when I get to Copenhagen in a month or so's time. But I think one of the most important, again, changes that we've seen is that finance function today has got to make itself indispensable. And of course it is indispensable, but it's always been seen, as I said in my earlier answer, a bit of a service industry. And actually today it's not the case. What you have to have today is you have to have finance which is ahead of the curve. It has to be looking out of the window every day. It has to know what's happening. It has to know what the new instruments are that are available. It has to know what the risks are, what the opportunities might be, and it has to be there right alongside the management, and in my case the chief executive's role, offering the advice and offering the support that a chief executive wants. Staying fit for the future is one of the absolute musts of companies today, and how many times, and I'm lucky because I have worked in companies that have had very successful periods, but every company that I've worked in has also had a period of less success, and that's because companies don't actually keep up to date with what's going on. They actually get a little bit fat, they get a bit happy, they get a bit complacent, and the minute you begin to do that, if you take a rest, you stop for a sandwich, you stop for a meal, you're finished. You have to be completely restlessly dissatisfied, and restless dissatisfaction is a phrase I use quite a lot. If you have restless dissatisfaction in your business throughout whatever you do, whether it's through innovation, whether it's in finance, whether it's in strategy, or whether it's actually just at the front face, that will keep your business lean, mean, and successful. Well, absolutely. I mean, finance has got a huge role to play. But I mean, in the old days, that's what finance did effectively. It gave us the cash to keep our businesses moving. But of course, one of the things that's changed in life is, and it's changing everywhere, is that businesses today have to look at their reputations. They have to look at their relationships with their customers. They have to look at their relationships with their suppliers. And they have to be able to look themselves in the mirror and say to themselves, actually, we as a company are doing the right thing. And just take the example of supplier finance. Well, it's not all about actually pushing out the terms. It's not all about actually stretching the cash flow. It's actually in the days of creating partnerships, about doing things for some suppliers and not doing it for others, making sure that we are getting the best out of the supply chain to make sure that the suppliers can be viable and, of course, the company that we run is viable. Well, the whole issue of taxation is a very thorny one. Of course, we all work in companies today that I think ought to be doing the right thing. I mean, companies are charged, if they're private companies or public companies, for doing the best for their shareholders. And clearly, we need to do the best we can to avoid paying excessive taxes. But there's a very fine dividing line between tax avoidance and tax evasion. And there is a case to be answered. But of course, this is not one that companies can answer themselves. This has to be sorted out on an international basis. And when that is sorted out by the countries concerned, I think we'll end up in a better place. But I think the recent cases that we've seen of companies that are well known who have been doing things that we are all not particularly comfortable with does lead us to think, well, maybe we should rethink this. When I first went into senior management, I genuinely thought that finance was an important function, but I did regard it as a service. And of course, I worked out very quickly that if you use finance in the proper way, it's actually another arm, it's another power to your elbow, it's another way of actually making yourself more successful. And I think that those chief executives, those chairmen who work closely with finance will find that they have a better time in running their businesses and their businesses are more successful. But equally, every chief executive and every chairman is looking for what I call a commercially minded finance director. And I think it's very important today that finance doesn't see itself as, if you like, old-fashioned number crunchers or the providers of money or the providers of financial instruments, but they actually see themselves as an important tool, an important part of developing strategy for the business with the particular skill set that they've got. And that really does mean at the end of the day that if those two parties work together, you get 1 + 1 equaling more than 2.